Welcome, everybody. My name is Greg Cangialosi. I'm the chairman and co-founder of Betamore, and it is truly my pleasure to bring you the inaugural session of Founder City. I'm so excited to be leading a session today on building a high-performance culture with my good friend, Andrew Freedman. Before I introduce him, let me give you a little bit about his background. Andrew is a lifelong advocate for maximizing human potential and creating positive change personally and professionally. For over 25 years, he's been a driving force in designing strategies that provide leaders a foundation to translate individual, team, and organizational talent into tangible business growth. Andrew has the pleasure and honor of serving as the managing partner of Shift Consulting. He's helped countless companies, including mine, across diverse industries flourish through vibrant company cultures and high-performance mindsets. Additionally, through his work on an affiliate faculty member of the University of Baltimore, Andrew's continued goal is to use his insatiable passion for human performance to inspire new generations of business leaders with the art and science of creating and executing successful, people-focused business strategies. It is my pleasure to welcome Andrew Freedman to the show. How are you?
I am well. I have been excited since we started talking about this. So excited for this conversation, not just because I geek out on the topic, but because I get to have it with you.
I'm so excited. This is our first session. As you know, we pivoted our beta city to Founder City in partnership with Fitzy, and you are our inaugural session. And we're going to talk today about building a high-performance culture. And I'd be remiss without mentioning that you are actively promoting your new book, which is called Thrive, and we're going to put it up here on the screen so people can see. Come on, Andrew, one of Forbes' 8 must-read books of the year. That's impressive, and so I'm looking forward to getting into it with you today, hear a little bit about your story as well. So let's just get into it. Before we talk about the book, before we talk about anything related to business, entrepreneurship, leadership, high performance, anything, let's talk about Andrew Freedman for a minute. Give us a little bit of background on you. We'd love to know the story. People love narratives. I've known you for, I guess it's got to be about, I don't know, it feels like 15 years or so. So let's a little bit about Andrew Freedman.
Yeah, I think, some of the things that would be important for people to know, it's so easy for me looking backwards to see where I am today and why it makes sense. But it didn't, 30 plus years ago when I was finishing up college. I've always been just a curious kid. I remember my mom, saying just from the youngest ages, I would walk up to strangers back maybe in the day when walking up to strangers was probably not so scary. I asked tons of questions nonstop. I was always so curious. I wanted to know why. I used to take apart all my electronics to try to understand how they work. So the point is, I've always had this fascination for why things work or why people work or why they don't. And everything that I've done in my life, from personal training and working in the health and fitness industry for 15 years to getting into consulting when you and I first met back in the early 2000s, to try to understand why some people could perform at high levels consistently and why others couldn't. I've just been fascinated with humans. I think there needs to be a college degree called peopleology,
Do you think,
not psychology.
would it be safe to say, as I hear your background and I hear as you traverse through youth, you're sort of like an engineer for humans, right? You're a human engineer. You're interested in the way things work, not only physically in a physical world, but also the way humans work and what makes us tick.
Yeah, well said. Well said. It all starts what's going on up for people in their head and also in their heart.
That's all.
That's always been important to me.
And so your journey has been, consulting. I had the pleasure of not working with you directly, but EntreQuest, which is now Shift today. Talk to us about that transition of the building blocks of getting to Shift today.
Yeah, when we started in the early 2000s, it was, the company was started like many because we got a client. And it was like, hey, this is a thing. We can, build a business now. We have a client. They're paying us.
There's money in the bank.
Yeah, right. How about that? That's kind of novel. But it started with the notion back to, just psychology and understanding people. You think about sales training or leadership training or things like that. And there are so many that people go to and they come back and they're all fired up. Hey, I learned this new thing. I learned how to negotiate better or lead better. And after a very short period of time, they revert back to their previous ways of thinking and operating. It's the same thing as New Year's resolutions. When we're having this session on March 31st, by this time, 80% of people who've set New Year's resolutions, they've already given up. And so we were fascinated with why that was. And that was really the start of our company.
Yep.
And we looked at where would be an opportunity where we thought we had a unique advantage, where we could bring this understanding of human beings and why they perform well, and create value. And so we started with sales, which was actually when we were working with you and your team.
That's right.
Was how do you build this sales machine? Because that's in many cases that's the lifeblood of the organization. So that was the genesis.
And I remember that very vividly too, because you guys were very focused exclusively on building out sales organizations. And at my company at the time, Blue Sky Factory, we had the makings of it, but we didn't have the mindset. We didn't have the culture right for that. And that's really, kind of, I think what leads up to what we're going to talk about today with Thrive. But I'll never forget, there was one part of that training that really was the breakthrough, right? I think you guys had it. It was called Breaking the Board, where you bring people
Absolutely.
out of their comfort zone and you put up a board and you punch it and break it. And it shows you that you can do things that you may have thought you couldn't.
That was such an interesting exercise because I'm sure you remember this. It was never about the force of breaking the board, like the force somebody used.
Yep.
We had people in their 70s, 80s, people who were not like massively didn't look physically strong, that just through focus on their goal were able to move through that board like what's the saying, a hot knife through butter.
Yep.
So that's really where we started, and then we really started thinking about our why, which I know we're going to talk about later.
Yeah.
And just the purpose of the company, why we existed, what we really aimed to do. And over time, that our vision got more bold and bigger because we really felt like we were here to have meaningful change in the world, not just in sales. And so our vision grew, especially when research started coming out around disengagement, workforce disengagement. And that number is still pretty, it's pretty drastic. And that is that 70% of the American workforce is disengaged in their work. And that has it is unbelievable. It's got nothing to do with COVID. It's got nothing to do with politics. It's got nothing to do with war, like booms, busts, Republicans, Democrats, peacetime, doesn't matter. That number hasn't changed. And so we really, planted our flag and said, we're on a mission, we're on a crusade to really flip that statistic. And so we got bigger and bolder. We really started thinking about all the things that lead to disengagement or engagement. And then we got that even bigger and said, it's not engagement for engagement's sake. It's engagement to drive outcomes, which is really when we started focusing on performance for the individual, for the team, and at the organizational level. And that's, when we changed our name from EntreQuest to Shift, really the name of the company, a few years ago picked us because we thought about everything that we do. And EntreQuest was a great name. It served us well. The brand was cool. But we started thinking about shifting mindset, shifting performance, shifting purpose. And we were like, we're a bunch of knuckleheads. Like the name of the company should be Shift. That's what we do.
You're shifting the work, right? I mean, that's what you're doing. And so over that and over these years of evolving, really, the kind of the core mission of the company, all the way through the name change. Also, you have Shift Ventures as well. You're doing some amazing things there with some early stage entrepreneurs. This has really been dialed in on like unleashing and unlocking the true potential of your team. And so let's just get into it a little bit. I'm curious, the idea behind Thrive, before I want to know that story real quick. What gave you the inspiration for it? Did you have it all in your head and then you were like, all right, this needs to be written. I got to get it out. Just talk to us about the thinking behind why Thrive is out on the shelves today.
It's definitely similar to what you described, and there's a bit of a personal story that I think makes sense to share. So the second part first, just around why the book. You're right. This, over 25 years, I've been doing what I'm doing, and I've had the great pleasure to meet a gentleman, Paul Elliott, who's my co-author for this. We wrote this book together. He's been doing, human performance work for over 40 years. We have had a great pleasure of working on a number of engagements together. And I love reading. I love listening to podcasts. And, I'm just fascinated by so much of this information and knowledge that I've gotten access to. But what I see in people is they have a tough time taking what they read or what they listen to in podcasts and then actually apply it. So when Paul and I were talking about this book, we agreed that what was important was not that this become a Jerry Maguire manifesto, but that we make this an actual usable guide for leaders so that when they read and get access to what we know, what we've done as business leaders, as consultants, as practitioners, as thought leaders, that they don't just read it as a cool, interesting book, but they go, wow, this makes sense. And I can use this today. I can put these practices, these principles, these battle-tested things into play today. So that was the purpose, was make it usable, get our expertise and our experience out of our heads and into as many hands and minds as we possibly could across the world. That's how we were thinking about the book. Why the book is important is more of a personal story, and it's actually in the front of the book for people who do choose to read it. And it goes back to as far back as my childhood, and just seeing some of the stuff that happened in my family. I had a really good childhood by many accounts. I didn't want for very much, but at the same time, there was a lot of turbulence. There was a lot of trauma in my family, and my dad went to jail a couple times. We lost our home a couple times.
Yeah.
My mom, was working two jobs for over 15 years just to make sure that we had a roof over our heads and food on the table. And as eventually she did wind up leaving my dad. And when she did, my mom and I have always been close. I remember her telling me that so many things had happened during the course of her life. And every time that something else happened with her and my dad, she felt like another piece of her, got lost.
Yeah.
And that if she hadn't left my dad, she would literally have evaporated into dust. Her being, everything that she stood for, would have been gone. And my mom is an amazing, amazing person. She is my rock in so many ways. A model for what's right, what's good, what's true, how I think about things. She was an educator for 36 years, and I said to myself at that point, I was not in a great place in my life personally. I was in a bad marriage. I made a bad decision. It wasn't the woman I was married to wasn't a bad woman. She was just not the right woman for me. And I said to myself, I've got to stop putting myself second. I've got to stop playing so small. I've got to stop not being, really who I was meant to be here on this planet. And Thrive was one way for me to manifest that, was to actually share, was to actually speak from the heart, was to actually operate from the heart, to build relationships from the heart, to allow myself the space to be in a loving relationship, but also not afraid to take my shots at work. And I know many of the people listening to this are founders or wannabe founders or entrepreneurs, and they're dealing with so much personal resistance,
Yeah.
and it's tough. And I would just, love to share with folks that part of my journey, that I had to fight through it. I had to see through it, and I had to really be honest with myself about what was most important in my world. And Thrive is just one example of that. I think that's important for your folks to hear today.
I think it's really important, Andrew, and I did read that in your book, and I really do appreciate you sharing it with the audience today, because it is interesting for people to see what drives them, and that is a very inspirational story, and I commend you for taking action on it and sharing your knowledge and your expertise and your wisdom with the world, really. And I do appreciate the not being afraid to throw your punches, as you said. Take your shots, right? Is what you said, and that's what it's all about. See a lot of founders, a lot of entrepreneurs. They all struggle in some case, in some way, shape, or form, myself included, with the imposter syndrome a little bit. We really have to continuously get ourselves out of our comfort zones, and what I like to call stretch thinking, right? Like knowing or thinking you can actually achieve something. Go the extra mile. Take the shot. And so your book and the message around Thrive and building these high performance teams is particularly connected to and related to early stage founders. I find is an interesting topic. So I'd love to just talk to you a little bit about it. And so, but let's just start at the beginning. Like, sir, when we talk about a high performance culture, right? Could you just describe what that does or what that doesn't mean? Let's just talk about, because there's so many different high performance this, high performance that. It could be sales, it could be, but really I think what you're talking about is more about alignment and unleashing people's true potential in a team environment.
Yeah, it is. It's probably makes sense as a foundation to lay down what it isn't,
Yeah,
and then lead to what it
what
is.
it
So
is.
what it isn't is a high performance culture is not measured by how many hours a person works. It's not measured by how hard they work or how hard they think they work. It's not about comparison or judgment. Those are things that we see in so many organizations, and especially now as we're still working through the pandemic. Leaders who are not high performing leaders have really struggled, and their teams have struggled through this pandemic because they're not co-located with their people, and so they're having a tough time measuring value creation. So what are they doing? They're booking more Zoom meetings with their people. They're starting their emails earlier in the morning, later at night. They're asking for more trackers and more tracking devices. And, business metrics are important, but they're putting their focus on the wrong thing, right? What high performance culture is, it starts with, first having a compelling vision. This is so important for, early stage organizations, leaders, entrepreneurs, is you've got to have that compelling, that vision, that purpose, that
The
why
why.
this exists. And that's got to be supported by values, a really tight value structure of what's most important, because the values and the associated behaviors guide the way that you think about things and also decisions. It allows you to have a framework to say, these are partners or businesses that I'd like to get involved with or that I wouldn't. These are people that I should hire or I shouldn't. These are ways that we should think about our customers or we shouldn't. So, vision, compelling, very clear where we're going, the purpose, the values, the foundation. And then in between that, you've got clear goals, clear strategies, clear tactics, clear scorecards. That's where, when you talk, about what high performance means, everybody's really clear on these things. They're not just words on a paper or on a business plan that's meaningless.
Yep.
It's really about bringing it to life and using that to guide. So everybody's clear, everybody's aligned. When all those things are true, high performance exists when you consistently, a team or an organization, meets or exceeds those company goals, strategies, and tactics in alignment with the vision and the values. That's the definition of high performance.
That's well said. And so, and I think as I think through my entrepreneurial journey and the various iterations of it, particularly where we know each other from Blue Sky Factory. I mean, you guys helped us also work towards that common framework that eventually we took and eventually ended up being making you a better marketer. And everything that I remember what we did as a company, once we got rallied around that vision of everything that we do makes you a better marketer, everybody got it, and everything we did mapped to it, and we were off to the races, right? And that's when all the things that you taught us back in the day, at EntreQuest and sales, everything just started activating and gelling. But it was because everybody knew what we were doing. They knew the mission, they knew the why, and we unlocked them to be their best. And also what I heard is, and I do want to talk to you a little bit more about this with the pandemic, especially now. We were just talking before the session about like the new way to come back to work here. Some people don't want to go back to the way it is, but like you said, it's really not about micromanaging people, right? If you're micromanaging your team, you probably have the wrong team, or you're definitely the wrong leader in some cases, right? I mean, obviously some things have to be micromanaged, but what I'm hearing from you is if you're clear on those fundamentals, the rest works itself out in terms of performance.
Yeah, it really does. Clarifying what excellence looks like and what success looks like at the organizational level, the business unit level, the team level, and even down to the individual level. It's so critical that people understand what value creation looks like so that when they come to work every day, they're really focused on the right things. They're not just focused on task lists and, being busy and, being reactive through the course of their day, responding to emails and phone calls. And too many people that we see when we first start working with organizations, they get through their day, Greg, and they don't even know if they won. They don't
Yeah.
even know if their work mattered because they're just not clear and they're not aligned.
Well,
And that's
70% of the workforce being disengaged, I mean, that's an unbelievable metric. I mean, it's just,
Yeah, I mean,
we,
people are going home and they're going, I don't know if my work was worth it today. I don't know if I mattered. I don't know if I won. And so how can a human re-enter their family life, whether they're working from home or working, in an office and coming home? It's like, how can you, smoothly transition back to connecting with your spouse, your partner, your kids, your community, your parents, whatever, if you're really not knowing if what you're doing matters? That's just a really tough downward spiral for folks. And frankly, it goes the other way too. If people are unfulfilled and unclear at home because they don't have a clear definition of what success in their family looks like, then that's going to spill over into work. So either way, these are two very important interwoven parts.
yeah, I mean, it's the human part, right? I mean, we're humans. We can't be parsing parts of ourselves out that are not like the full being, right? And what you're talking about is, I really think, the integration of the 360 view of the person and the bigger picture. So, importance of clarity and alignment is really what I'm hearing from you, especially when it comes to vision, values, goals, different strategies in an organization. Um, in Thrive, particularly, you talk about role excellence process. So, role excellence process. that helps leaders understand what high performance looks like in these key roles and how to replicate higher levels of performance at scale. I don't know if we want to jump right to that, but can you help the Founder City community understand a little bit more about the process of role excellence and why it's so important, particularly for early stage companies?
Yeah, that's the context is everything here. For early stage companies, oftentimes what we see people doing is they're saying, all right, well, I need to hire somebody that does sales. I need to hire somebody that does marketing. I need to hire an operationally oriented person. And so they're looking through their network. They're looking to get connections. And often, I'll just say this. In general, we suck at hiring. Just say that. We are not good at hiring as a people. Most hiring managers and leaders, they wind up hiring people that they get energy from, that they like, who kind of think like them, who maybe have some good track record or experience on the resume. But you really need to understand what is it that your organization needs to power your vision forward. What kinds of people, what kinds of thinking, what kind of skills, like what kind of stress testing do these people need? What kind of battle testing do they need? It's not just about have they helped another company go from, early stage startup to being sold for a bunch of money.
Yeah.
I mean, that's great.
That's great.
But the data doesn't support that's necessarily going to be a leading indicator of success. There's other things. And so for early stage startups, they've got to really be clear and think forward to what are the outcomes of value that this role, whatever the role is you're looking for, need to produce. Example might be if it's a sales focused role, sure, you want them to produce revenue, but what kind? What kind of relationships do they need to build? What kind of pipeline do they need to build? You really want to think about the value that needs to be created so that you can then be very clear on the specific tasks that need to be done for the person to accomplish what they need to accomplish with high levels of proficiency and consistently. So as opposed to just hiring people and then going, well, of course they know what's expected. They've done this before. One of our managing directors, Jeff Lesher, I love a lot of what he says. One of the things that he says often is, nothing is obvious unless we make it so. Too often I hear leaders say, well, it's obvious. Everybody knows what's expected. People know. They know how they're doing it. They don't. People don't know. You've got to make it abundantly clear. And so the role excellence process allows leaders to make very clear and transparent the outcomes of value that need to be produced, the tasks that need to be produced, and then the influences that people can get access to help them do their job better. It's a critical process for all organizations, but especially these early stage startups.
In hiring, you hit it. It's a lot of people are bad at it, and I certainly guilty as charged of over my career of entrepreneurship. Made some bad hires, and fortunately made a lot more good ones than I did bad ones. But it is difficult too when you're a founder trying to evaluate the right teammates to come on at the right times, at the right cadence as well. I know a lot of this is totally driven on growth and where you're at the stage of the company. But what are some tips that you could potentially drop in here if you're a founder kind of, looking to make that first or second really key hire that's gonna kick the company into gear, or hopefully move somebody into this, role excellence, success, if you will. It's so hard because you get so many, when there's an open rec, and a lot of people are looking for jobs right now, or work, meaningful work too. A lot of people I know are looking to make changes in their lives, and that's for a number of different reasons. But I think the pandemic certainly brought a lot of things to light and home for a lot of people. But when you're evaluating, 20, 30, 40 resumes, and maybe there's some connective tissue there where you may know somebody, but really, like you said, it's not about, okay, you had some success before, but are you going to have success here? What are some of the ways like founders can kind of cut through signal versus noise?
Two things that I'll suggest. One is whether people choose to use the role excellence profile or not, or some other process, it is about having clarity on what excellence looks like in the role, so that in the interview process, you can ask case-based or scenario-based questions to allow you to know how the person thinks and will they actually be able to not just survive, but thrive in your organization in the context of your goals. So, some kind of clarity up front, and then really gear the interview questions to be case-based or scenario-based. That's suggestion number one. Suggestion number two is use data. Use data. There's a number of diagnostics that people can use in the hiring process. So whether that's Myers-Briggs or Predictive Index or Hogan, we've partnered with a company TTI. We use their DNA diagnostic. We love it. It's unbelievably accurate. The algorithm behind it is so spot on. And what it does is it allows you to understand what motivates a person. So, what's going to drive them to action? What are their behaviors, their top behaviors that they're going to use to do their work? And then how do they actually think? And so when you understand that about the human, then you'll be able to put that in the context of the work and ask people even more specific questions about what's likely to happen in their work, how they'll handle those situations, to tell you about specific times in the past, about how they've dealt with things. This will allow the hiring managers, the entrepreneurs who, frankly, founders are, they're really good at what they do, their business, why they started the company. They're oftentimes founders they're not trained and seasoned in hiring. So those two things, use some kind of specificity, case-based analysis, and then use some kind of data mechanism, some kind of diagnostic.
I'm so glad you brought that up too. The second point there is so key, and we have come so far from a technology standpoint as well in terms of using these assessment tools depending on the job role, right? So if you're an analyst, there's a different type of test you're going to take than a hacker rank, which is for engineers and developers. But these tools now, much like our friends over at Catalyte have developed, to be able to assess and identify whether or not someone's going to be a good engineer who has no experience in STEM at all, right? Or maybe just doesn't even have an education or a college degree, but still has the way they think and the way their mind processes can make them an incredible engineer. And that, to your point, is now kind of spread across a lot of areas of functional areas of businesses. And so these tools are available for entrepreneurs, and they should use them, especially now.
Nailed it. I appreciate you mentioning the folks at Catalyte. They do amazing, amazing work. It's actually where Paul is spending a bunch of his time now with the team there.
That's great.
And helping them with his human performance architecture way of thinking and bringing some of this to make what they do even more robust. It's just, they're an amazing team.
So the other thing that we had talked about, and you talk a lot about, mindset. You talk a lot about resistance. You talk a lot about resilience. The last one, I always say, entrepreneurship is a journey of self-discovery, right? And you're constantly like a flower unfolding and blooming, hopefully. But being resilient and having tenacity is one of those traits that I just, I think is so important. But talk to a little bit, especially when it comes to high performance culture. You talk about mindset, resistance, resilience. Talk a little bit more about that. I'm just curious.
Yeah, in any organization and in any role population, there is some kind of distribution curve. It's typically a pretty normal distribution curve, meaning you've got a very small percentage of people who are the exemplars, the very best of the best, like the 1%ers in what they do. Mm-hmm. You got a few people who are laggards, and the majority of folks are sitting in the middle of that bell curve. And so when we think about the work that we do, part of the thing that we learn about the highest of the high performers is they just have a different mental model. They think about the world differently. They think about their work differently. Oftentimes that connects to their mindset. Some people like to say it's a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, right back to Carol Dweck's, book and some of her research. And I agree with this. So it does start with mindset. What is a person's worldview? Example would be, if I come to work every day feeling like my work doesn't matter, or I'm unseen, or I've been passed over for promotions, I'm never going to get ahead, my boss doesn't listen to me, I've never been an entrepreneur before, so what makes me think that I'm going to be able to be successful now? It's a very disempowering mindset. It's tough to win and create a high performance attitude or approach coming from that perspective. So we use mindset as the general wrapper about somebody's worldview. And then resistance and resilience really, they represent and reflect the two parts of us. In the book, the way that I talk about it is light self and dark self. So the dark self is when resistance shows up. And we all have this. So this is not a business conversation. This is a human conversation, like you mentioned earlier, Greg.
Yes.
So people they have fear, they have doubt, they have stress, they have the imposter syndrome you referred to. That's all the resistance.
The resistance.
We're all going to deal with that. So, there's one of the things that I love, I didn't invent this, is the only way out is through. The only way out is through. And so when it comes to resistance and our aversions, what's important for people to hear, especially the entrepreneurs, is don't fight your aversions, don't avoid them. You got to surrender to them. You got to understand them, and you got to work through them. Example for me personally is, growing up, and I still have a bit of this with me today, I've always had a fear of not having enough money. And every time in my life that I tried to find a get rich quick thing or a shortcut or a way to get out of debt, guess what I wound up finding? More
Failure.
debt,
Yeah.
more debt,
Deeper hole.
because I was avoiding it as opposed to really trying to understand what was going on for me. Why was I having these issues? What was really important in my life? And then align my thinking and behavior to that. And that's the resilience. The resilience is your purpose. The resilience is your why. The resilience is your light. It's your hope. It's your faith, not spiritual faith necessarily, but just your faith that you're going to get through this. And for everybody listening to this conversation, here's what I know, even though I may not know many of you. You've done hard things in your life. I know this because you're here.
That's right.
All of us have gotten through hard things. So you can do more hard things like starting an organization, starting a company, building a thriving enterprise. And I know this because you've done hard things. So remember that is your resilience. You can do this because you've already done hard things.
Tough. So I'm just curious though. How did you work through the fear of money? It's a big one. You're not the only one that had it, but obviously you've gone through.
I've gone through, and it's still with me. It's like the little Great Gazoo from the Flintstones, that little green dude that sits on your shoulder. He's there.
You just accept it. You've just accepted it.
And for years, I used to blame my dad because my dad had all kinds of money problems. He had gambling issues, and I was like, well, I guess I'm destined to be just like Dad. I guess I'm destined to, not have it figured out. I guess I'm destined not for greatness. I'm always going to struggle, right? And so finally, I needed to get back to my own personal success definition of why am I here? What's really most important in my life? For example, if I want to have a fulfilling, loving relationship, if I really want to grow a thriving business, then I need to adjust my attitude and my behavior to align with that. I can't have a truly fulfilling personal relationship if I am financially irresponsible. That equation just doesn't work.
That's right.
So it all starts with defining success. And that's what I do with regularity. It's not a once a year New Year's resolution thing. I am always working on how am I defining success. It's important.
No, thanks for sharing that. It is very important. I am curious too, because your work at Shift and your team, is kind of spread, and you're entrenched in a lot of different organizations, and you guys do amazing work. And it's like I said, it's been a pleasure to watch the evolution of Shift. But here we are, a year later, so to speak, from when the world has completely shut down, and we're still kind of going through this, obviously. I'm curious from a work perspective and a culture perspective, what are some of the things that you've seen with the companies that you and your team have worked with outside of the obvious things we talked about earlier about, putting more measures on people, Zoom fatigue, all that kind of stuff. But just what do you think are some of the core things that people have been struggling with when it comes to high performance cultures and teams? And bring that up to today where we're kind of because we were talking about before the session, some things have fundamentally changed forever. And I just kind of wonder what those things are and how do you think they're going to have an impact on some businesses?
Yeah, some of the parts of the just normal business and employee life cycle, these are things that are still important. How they happen will have evolved. So for example, companies are still going to need to hire. Yep. They're still going to need to onboard. Yep. They're still going to need to train their people. They're still going to need to have a performance management process and ways to give good feedback and foster connections. I'll just stop there because that's already a long list. In companies that are, that have not only maintained, but have actually thrived during the pandemic, and there are many who have, what we find is that care, connection, and clarity with those leaders and their teams has increased. And so leaders,
it's increased.
It's increased. Yeah. So you've got leaders who, are spending time really making sure that they understand how their people are feeling, not just how and what they're doing. How are they feeling? So some people listen to this, they might go, oh my God, what are you telling me? I have to be like a psychiatrist or a psychologist? Like I got to talk about people's feelings. Yes. You have to know your people more than ever. One of the things that COVID did, didn't necessarily change anything as much as it accelerated it. All the data has said that, over the course of the next 3 to 5 years, I think it's the highest number that I've seen is maybe 60%, but at least 40% of the workforce is going to be job sharing or fractional workers or gig workers. Right? I mean, that's just where the world is going. And so the days of I own you, you're my employee, 40, 50 plus hours a week, people need to just change the way that they think about that. And we need to rethink what we mean by value creation, which would include where now are we looking for talent, especially because we're working in this, work from anywhere. It's like, we don't need to hire people who live in Baltimore. Why would we do that?
It's been one of the most dramatic shifts I've seen myself. I'm, working for Olive. We've gone through. We're one of those companies that is growing like a weed through the pandemic. And originally it was Columbus, Ohio, right? And now we're 44 states and probably going to be in all 50 soon. And it's unlocked an incredible amount of talent that otherwise would never have probably even had the opportunity if it wasn't for the situation. But yeah, keep going. You're right. The search for talent now is it become global in some cases, particularly as it relates to the gig economy. If you could do
Yes.
things virtually speaking.
Totally on the same wavelength with you. And that, gets to the next evolution or transformation or change, which is for many leaders, they need to rethink what leadership means. They need to rethink what their metrics of success are. They need to rethink what's most important in setting up their day, because we see a lot of leaders over the past year. They've tried to take their old processes and ways of engaging with and managing their team and just shoehorn them into this work from anywhere environment. And it's not working. And so some of those leaders are very frustrated. Their people are frustrated. Zoom fatigue is one thing, but leave that aside for even a second.
Yeah.
People are saying, not all, but people who are not working in high performance cultures are reporting that they've been working upwards of 4 more hours a day. And you go, wait a minute, but they're not commuting, but they're right. I mean, it's like,
It's unbelievable.
and it's because they're waking up in the morning and because their bosses also aren't commuting. Their bosses are sending out emails earlier, right? These little gizmos, these devices that oftentimes people sleep with next to their bed or in their bedroom. They're opening their eyes in the morning, and the first thing they're doing, or one of the first 3 things they're doing, is they're checking their phone.
Yep.
And so they're getting texts and emails from their bosses. So they're starting work earlier, and they're not even giving themselves a chance to get their head right, to meditate or practice gratitude or exercise, or just, for God's sakes, wake up with a little bit of clarity. They're just jumping right into the fray.
How about grab a cup of coffee?
Right, nothing. So they're overstressed. They're working through lunch, and then they are more tethered to the devices at night, and so they're staying online longer. This whole way of thinking and operating needs to be blown up.
I'm telling you, I have a 12-year-old at home that has been sitting behind a computer from 8:30 till roughly 3:30 every day, depending on whether she has tutoring afterwards or takes lesson or whatnot, or reads with her grandparents. It's unbelievable. And so, having recently re-entered in this new role at Olive, I've now understand the Zoom fatigue thing, and it's pervasive. It's everywhere. How do you think leaders can address this in the sense of not making that happen, or give them some tips to? I mean, I know we talked about some of them, but it's definitely not sustainable 100%. People are exhausted by the end of the day. So they can't re-enter, as you said, their family lives in a state of mind. The fact that 70% of people in the workforce are disengaged from their works makes it all even worse. And now we're at a point where we're going to be, I like to say, kind of re-entering, if you will, a little bit of what used to be pre-COVID. And so I'm trying to think through this massive shift in workforce, this massive shift in working. And now how people are going to try to re-enter, and going back to that question before about what do you think is not coming back? Do you think, if you're a leader, I mean, I've always had people around me. I've been big into building the team, having the interaction. You can't ever replace serendipity and collision without being around other human beings. The fact that all went away for everybody, but is now in a vaccinated world starting to come back. I mean, what should leaders be thinking about, especially as their teams have been remote for a year?
Yeah. What I would not want to snap back or go back to the way that it was before is everybody needs to be in the office all the time.
Yeah.
I definitely would not bring that back.
I think we
I
have
would,
proven that that does not need to be the case at this point.
yes, yes. And yet I still talk to some leaders today. They're like, I can't wait to get my people back in the building. And in some cases, we're talking about externally facing salespeople. And they're like, yeah, I want my people in at 8 o'clock in the morning in the office. I'm like, why? Why would you want that? Why? What possible value could that bring? Anyway, so that's one thing. No snap back to everybody back in the office. Two is I would want leaders to rethink the way that they are measuring performance.
That's
So
a big
what
one.
metrics?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's
what
talk.
metrics really matter? Um, yeah,
Yeah. No, I mean it's true, and then also just the. I mean, I think the office thing alone. I mean, I just I'm down here at Baltimore, and I was telling the crew here that I haven't been down here in over a month, and driving through the city and traffic, and I think we've also gained a lot of time in our work schedules. But what I found a little hack at, and it's not a big one, but blocking off the time on the calendar to have the actual work time and think time so that you're not just watching what I call Zoom TV all day. It's just like it could be channel surfing, right? With the different, squad of Brady Bunch heads, you know what I mean, on everyone's TV or everyone's screen. And that's one that I've found is big for me, at least even in the remote environment. But I do feel like, there are people that are going to go back to a hybrid type of environment, where we have the office. I read an article this morning about how so many of these big companies like Salesforce, they're all looking to sublease their spaces now, because even though we're all growing in one direction, now they need to backfill the space that they've taken so much. I think too, it's going to be some kind of combination thereof of hybrid.
yeah, I agree. And therein lies a massive opportunity, which for leaders who I'm just going to say they're enlightened,
Mm-hmm.
that term.
Okay.
What they leverage are processes like tiger teams or action learning projects or work groups.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give you a specific example. The leaders could say, so here's what we believe. We believe that there is value in us being co-located some of the time, maybe
Mm-hmm.
in some kind of hybrid fashion. So what we'd love to do is pull a small group of people from across functional roles from our business, and let's just have a dialogue and talk about what would be the causes for us gathering. When should we be together and why? When can we still leverage technology in a productive way? When do we actually need to be in the same physical space with our clients, with our teams, and actually make it a discussion with people so that they don't feel like things are being done to them. People want agency, they want a voice.
That's
And
great.
so that's a great practice that anybody can do. And I
That
would do that absolutely.
it's really, I think what you're getting at is let's get to the why, right? On that too. Let's not just beyond the company, the why of the company, the why of the people. Like, why do we need to actually, what are we going to gain by being in the same room? And that's not that you're constantly pushing against it's a rub. But it's great. It's really, what can we achieve if we're in the same room together, and how can we make that the most productive, effective, and highest use of our time together? And
The
that's the
other,
way we look at going back to work.
I completely agree. You nailed it. I'll just mention one other piece that could be a lightning rod for some folks. I don't know, but we'll see what kind of comments you get as people are listening to this. It's actually business development. I remember, easily the days of, doing an up and back flight. I'm in Baltimore, as you know, up and back flight to Boston or to Chicago or to Atlanta on the same day for one business development meeting. And, over the last year, I mean, when COVID first hit, all candor, business development really dried up for us. I mean, it was like it died on the vine. But starting with the summer of last year, things began to open up because people really needed our help to navigate through this pandemic, through this crisis. And things have really started to open up now as we're here in 2021. My point is, there are ways to still build and form new relationships, to build trust, to understand reciprocal needs, to create value through the phone, through Zoom meetings like, or technology-based meetings like this. That doesn't mean, I'm not being binary here. That doesn't mean never should we get on a plane and go meet somebody for a business development meeting or an existing client. Of course there are times when, but the days of me doing an up and back and being like, yeah, I was up and back in Boston today, or yeah, I was up and back in Chicago. What a great meeting. It's like, we got to rethink that. We don't need to go back to that.
That is so true. I mean, you're just bringing me back to my blue sky days when but used to take. I mean, I used to take the AirTran, right out of BWI to Logan, and we had an office up there, and I'd go work out of the office for the day or take meetings or whatnot, and then hop on that like 7 or 8 and be back at my house by 9:30 at night. Doesn't need to happen again. Does not need to happen. That's one of the saving graces of technology, but just using it at the right time for the right purpose. But you talked about something really interesting. I mean, particularly as it relates to biz dev. I mean, it is fascinating to see how the world has continued to move forward in an environment where there's so many sales. Are people focused, number one, but they've always been in person. To watch that whole transition, what are some of the things you've seen people struggle with in that area, or in some cases break through? Because I mean, I've seen people perform at incredible levels from building new revenue opportunities in sales, all over a computer, all like this. And then I've seen people not do it so well.
Yeah. Well, some of the struggles include things like, this is going to go back to mindset,
Yeah.
which is if I believe that I must be face to face, like actually physically in person, not through technology, that I must be face to face in order to build a relationship or actually make a sale, then I'm really limiting my potential and my possibilities.
You've already halfway lost in your head, right?
Absolutely. I'm coming to the game at -10 already. That's really tough to win that way. So that's one of the things that I've seen people struggle. Part of that also gets to back to the data driven and the diagnostics is some people really, they get juice from, they're motivated by being face to face with clients. They get energy from other humans. And so they've really struggled with trying to find ways to get energy through technology. That transmission has been tough for a lot of people.
What about, so there's sales, and then you have, let's go from team perspective, okay? And particularly depending on where you're at, maybe you're hiring, 1 or 2 people, maybe it's just you and your co-founder, but let's just say you're a company that's got, you're over 10, maybe you're between 10 and 20, right? What about team? I've seen so many different approaches to team building, right? But how do you break through? What do you think some ideas are to keep your team connected outside of a work environment, really? So we're not gathering here. We're not talking about anything related to the company per se. We're trying to connect as people, particularly as folks are in some cases like Olive. We're in a fast growth mode right now, so we're hiring hundreds of people, right? So bridging those teams together has to be done like this for now. But in general, I'm just thinking about the whole idea of the Zoom happy hour again. It's been played out. People don't want to be on Zoom all day and then sit on Zoom and drink with their teammates. Have you seen any creative things pop out of resulting from the pandemic to keep people kind of bridged together, but like bring the human outside of work together?
Yeah, yes, for sure. And I got to lay a little foundation because, some of what I'm going to suggest, if the things that we talked about earlier are not in place,
Yep.
these won't work quite as well for all the reasons you just described. It's like, if I'm not in a high performing culture, if I don't feel connected to my boss, if I'm not clear on my why, if I don't feel purpose driven in work, the last thing I want to do is sit on another Zoom meeting with my colleagues.
Totally.
I don't care what kind of happy hour thing we're having. Like it just doesn't matter. I don't want to do it. I'm spent. I want to unplug. So let's assume that we're working in an organization, maybe has adopted and applied some of the things we've talked about earlier. Then, it's about one, pull your team, have a real conversation. If we say to our team, one of the things that's important to us is maintaining care, clarity, and connection. If that's important to us from a value standpoint, ask team members, how can we do that most effectively? What are some of your ideas? So this isn't about leaders always having the right answer. It's about them being good listeners and creating space for other people to weigh in. What some of our people have told us and what we've seen with some of our clients is doing some experiences, actually pulling the family in to some of these experiences. And you can seasonalize some of these things. Like in October, we did a pumpkin carving contest, and our people with their kids came on and they showed their what they created and things like that. We can you can do different games and contests where people are submitting pictures of them doing something healthy with their family. Leaders can actually give people what we call here at Shift Better You time, which is we shut down I'm sorry.
No, it's interesting. Keep talking
Yeah,
about that.
we shut our offices down midday on Fridays, and in some cases, especially during the summer, it was like 3/4 of the day, oftentimes all Friday. We just gave people off, and we gave them off so they could have a little bit of a relief or release valve. What we asked of them is use that time to do something good for yourself. And what we found was, interestingly, is that people who did live around each other actually took that time safely, right? Safe distances, masks and everything.
Totally.
They'd go for walks, they'd go for runs, they'd take their dogs out walking. They would actually do stuff together they wanted to
Yeah.
because they were craving that kind of connection and they really care about each other. So that's, you can create some space for
Yep.
folks, make sure that they know that you care and you want them to invest in themselves. And what you'll find is they naturally gravitate towards others and they build more connection. So that's something else that can be done. And then, when you think about all the stuff that's happened over the past year, I mean, we had a crazy election cycle, we had Black Lives Matter and all kinds of social unrest, we had the pandemic. We just changed the conversation, frankly, Greg. We had many times with our team where we weren't even talking about our business.
Yep.
We were just creating space for people to express and explore how are they feeling about what's going on in the world?
Yep.
How is this impacting them? Like that level of care and connection really bonds people together. And it doesn't matter where they're located in the world, really, not just in the US. These things matter. And so for folks listening, entrepreneurs, as you're thinking about building your team, this comes back to your vision and values. What kind of connection do you want to build in your organization? And how can you foster that through things like what we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think really the overarching kind of theme that I've picked up on our conversation today and through your book is, really just it's really caring about the human, right? And the whole person and really looking at, the individual and mapping to the alignment of your company's values, goals, and overall direction. And I think, like you said, once you have those things bought in, great things can happen. But you've cited several examples of things when they're not in place, things are just going to go bad, or they're not going to go at least according to the plan. But really, overall, a focus on the individual and the human, which I really do. I think that's spot on, and particularly, we have lived in a very, very turbulent world over the last year. To your point on all those things mentioned, and people, it affects people in a lot of ways. And I think that's another really good important point is to give people the space to express themselves, to process what's going on in the world around them, and not make it all the time 100% about work and what they're doing and just grind. It's like letting people breathe and taking the space.
Yep, totally agree. There's plenty of time for the grind. It
Plenty of
matters.
time.
Let's do it when it matters most.
So I have, we were going to do this in person today, but I'm going to have 20 copies signed by you of the book Thrive that we are going to give out in some way, shape, or form. We're going to figure this out by the time we go live. Maybe it's the first 20 people that do something. We're going to post it soon, but we appreciate you and your publisher with those books to our audience. So 20 of you out there listening to this are going to get a copy signed by Andrew of Thrive to take it to the next level. So I guess really in closing, Andrew, on this inaugural session here of Founder City, I'm so used to saying Beta City, but it's Founder City. What are some of the key things you want our audience to walk away with as it relates to our conversation today?
One is I'll sum up what we talked about in this way, which is everybody listening is a leader, and when you think about the one phrase or one sentence purpose of a leader, it is to create a barrier-free work environment. So whether you're building that from scratch as an entrepreneur and a founder, or you're working in a place that's already an established firm, that's the purpose of the leader. So before looking at everybody else and being like, that person's not performing well, and that person's so messed up, and why won't they do this? Heal thyself first. Look in the mirror and say, how are you as a leader creating this barrier-free environment? That's the first piece. The second piece is where we started, around clarity and alignment. And then the third is your piece around it is about the whole human. Let's really make sure that when we're thinking about a high-performance culture, that we keep the human at the center of everything that we're talking about, because without the humans, as much as AI and machine learning and all that and where we're going, and I dig all that, it's really important. And we got to remember the human, to build these human-centered, human purpose-driven organization. So those would be the three things I would leave our listeners with today.
All good stuff. And Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time out today to be our first session here in Founder City, a new event that we're doing. Appreciate you working out the tech stuff with us on this first and only recorded version. So in the future ones, we'll do some Q&A, but I think having folks know that they have potential to get a copy of your book is good enough for today's session for sure. So thank you so much for your time, your energy, your passion. And congrats big time on Thrive. It's such a great honor to see you hit the Forbes list and right out of the gate there. So the message resonated with me. Hopefully it's going to resonate with a lot of other folks. So thank you for your time today, and thanks again for supporting Founder City.
Absolutely. I appreciate the conversation and you, Greg, and everything you're doing. Appreciate you, brother.
Awesome, Andrew. Have a great day.
You too.
Seemed like it went well.